We look a little unpolished. Let's try to polish it. Is that any better? Well, it's a little bit better. You guys can see my face, which is peeling. Don't know why. I don't know why the things in life happen to me the way they do. They just do. But I hope everybody's having a good day. And today I wanted to talk about some new archaeology that's going on, as well as see how you guys gauge, I guess, how you guys are interested, if you are interested, in some standalone episodes with video clips and audio, as well as photos from these places. So, we're going to be talking about, uh, kind of a topic today. For those of you who are here, or those of you in the future looking back on time, looking back on this, we're going to chat. I'm going to chat at you at first, and then we can chat a bit. But first of all, shout out to the Willamette Valley Aquarium Society. I got their shirt on at the moment. I always love coming to chat with places near and far. And they're one of the few other clubs in the Northwest, even though it's a good, I don't know, 5, 6 hour drive down there. M. Myers, what's going on? Vinoski, the Aquascapes, Coro, House of Pisces, Cave of Wonders. So good to see all of you. Junkbox Aquatics, Johnny Best always here. Andy, Carson, all things nature in Hawaii with Steve. Good to see y'all. So I'm going to jump right in. All right. So as human beings, we have a very long history with fish. And you may wonder, well, how long of a history is it that humans have with fish? And it's so long that we may have a history with fish and human beings, Homo sapiens, our species, that goes all the way back to when our species was forming, till all the way back when there were multiple forms of our species. Hi, honey, you're on camera. And back when, that's my wife, she just got home, so she's saying hello. I think she's getting ready to go for a walk or run or jog or something with her fancy, what's that, flash dance outfit that she's got on. Koro says, hey, Lara. Her Koro. Yes. Thanks, Koro, for sharing those links too. Anybody thinking about buying some fish, if you get them from Moonlight, or you get them from Dan's Fish, or you get them from Aquatic Arts, all those things help out the channel. All those sources are vetted by moi, and I have a stake in it, in that the channel gets support, but also that I snap my fingers and I say, guys, make sure you do it right, And if anybody has trouble, I can kind of get to the management usually pretty quickly. Although they are places I support, so they tend not to have problems. Most people tend to have a good time there. With Moonlight having the best deals, Dan's Fish having probably the best quality but expensive fish, and Aquatic Arts having somewhere right in the middle but unusual invertebrates and shrimp and things like that for a good price. In fact, Moonlight has orange-eyed neocaradinas, or did recently, on the website, and you can get 10% off using my link. They also had zebra plecos, the L46s, the OG, super expensive, used to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Now they are $118 with the discount if you want to use it. So check those out if you're in the mood to buy some fish. Speaking of our relationship with fish that I'm about to get back to. Okay. And hello, Crown Tail Half Moon and Branton Lightcap. Hello, thank you for being a member. Paul McCarthy, good to see you. Josh B, good to see you. All right, so the earliest human interaction with fish seems to be so long ago that there were Neanderthals, there were Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo heidelbergensis. There were all these other human-ish, the Denisovans, the Florentians, all these other human-ish hominids. And hominid just means, they branched off long after the great apes, but they are part of the human ancestry in the sense that they happened to be species that all broke off that don't exist anymore. They all broke off in the last 4 or 5 million years since the great apes, like gorillas, orangutans, bonobos, since all that went one way and the great apes and primates stayed in their group, this other group branched off and all started walking on two legs and bipedal motion and having brains that were getting bigger. Well, when all this was going on, there were still Neanderthals until 25 to 30,000 years ago, probably, interacting with humans. In fact, if you are European or you're Asian, or you're Asian, either of those, you have Neanderthal in your genes almost certainly. If you are African, if you are from the continent of Africa and have no admixture into your genes after that, you may be pure Homo sapien, so to speak. But most people who are from an ethnic group that left Africa, you have a mix back in your DNA between 0.5% all the way up to 4.5% Neanderthal. And if you're Asian and or Polynesian or North American indigenous or South American indigenous, there's a good chance you have Denisovan and Neanderthal. There's a chance that you also have one or two others that haven't been discovered yet, that we are still learning about through genetics, because there's still a chunk of the human DNA that is some other kind of hominid that we can't track down. And it appears that they moved somewhere between 50,000 or 60,000 years ago. That's the quickest it could have happened, all the way back to 400,000 years. So almost 500,000 years ago, people, us, may have moved and been interbreeding with these other groups, just like the European Neanderthal and Homo sapiens probably mixed, probably fought, probably it just depended. And in that process, we all share a love of fish. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, humans, they appear on the scene in Africa, in the heart of Africa, near Ethiopia, near the Rift Lakes, kind of where we get all of the wacky, wild cichlid variation in Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, and Lake Victoria, which isn't a rift lake, but it's a big flooded valley, essentially, that since the ice ages gets bigger and smaller. And for that matter, northern Africa had a very wet period in which there were massive lakes, including modern day the wetlands of Lake Chad, used to fill very deep, 50, 60 feet instead of 10 feet deep in reeds and marshes. And there used to be some of the biggest lakes in the world in the Sahara Desert on what is now salt plains and sand dunes. And in this area, fish were a massive resource, both in everyday life for humans and for non-humans that were hominids. So whether it was Neanderthals, kind of, which seem to have formed leaving northern Africa and in the Middle East, and humans seem to probably have come out through 2 or 3, maybe more successful waves of immigration to Asia. And some follow the coastline of India and end up going all the way to what is modern day Thailand and Vietnam area. And it looks like that's happening 500,000 years ago to around 200,000 years ago. It's not very clear. Honey, are you going somewhere? Oh, okay. It's like everybody's like watching you like get ready, so I'm just no. I was just curious where you're going. That's all. Everyone's like, what's she up to? Well, I hope you have an awesome walk, babe. And more people say, hello, Mrs. Hello. We hope you're doing well. Have a good walk. Okay, guys. So, sorry, I get distracted very easily. So, there is this mixture of humans and human-ish, our closest cousins, our closest relatives, all leaving Africa, spreading out past Africa. We don't know if they were there long before. I hope she brings you back ice cream. I highly doubt it. We have no ice cream shops in the neighborhood, but that would be amazing. We do have ice cream in the freezer, though. Sorry. Okay, back on track for those of you watching this in the future. So I've given talks on this, and I've even Oasis reformed. That's a rumor. I saw that in the UK. The Gallagher brothers are clowns that reform and then break up before they even have a gig. House of Pisces, I wouldn't buy it. Okay, so anyways, I've given this talk to the Seattle Club. I thought it would be a talk that nobody wanted to hear outside of the, I guess anthropology nerds like myself. But it turns out that people were kind of interested. So that's why I'm sharing it here again. But, humans as a species, once we're already called humans, we had a brain that was about 800 cubic centimeters. Now, there's other versions of pre-humans that had brains that were 500, 600, 700, all the way up to 800 cubic centimeters in size. It's like yay big. By the time we make it to this size, look at my big old head and the random cut. No idea how I got this. I think it's just dry skin, but no idea how I got that. Anyways, this brow that we get, and then less of a brow once we get the big back cranial bump going on here. That is formed in 1,000,000 years. It didn't form in 8,000,000 years prior to that, but all of a sudden, in all the hominid species, it starts getting bigger. And it depends on which species and at which rate it grows at. So if the hominid species are human, Neanderthal, Heidelbergensis, any of these types of close to human bipedal hominids, it appears as though they stopped living in the savannas of, Central Africa to Eastern Rift Africa, and they started living around the Rift Lakes, and they follow them down, and then they follow them along with, there's ice ages going on, off and on and off and on, and the wetlands or the humid era of the Sahara expands and then contracts back to a desert, expands and then contracts back to a desert. And that's going on all through Africa. But when it's wet and when the rain is coming down and the earth is warm, in between ice ages, the interglacial periods that happens naturally, there are pathways, just like the pathway where humans came to North and South America, and we don't know for sure when all that went down, or if humans came by boat, or, we don't know for sure, because right now all those dates are in question. But the humans came down through Africa, made it all the way to South Africa. So around 800,000 years ago, 900,000 years ago, they make it all the way to the coast of Mozambique and South Africa and KwaZulu-Natal and Natal. And they make it all the way up into Egypt, through the Sinai, into Israel, into Saudi Arabia, which was much, much lush, more green. and into Jordan and Iraq and kind of modern day Middle Eastern countries, probably all the way up to Turkey. We don't know. This being almost a million years ago, 800,000 years ago. Well, one interesting group, and we don't know if they've survived or not, we see that from 900,000 years ago, 890,000 years ago to be exact, give or take 10,000 years, the group of humans that lived around the modern day Dead Sea in today's Israel, there were a bunch of lakes in the area. And archaeology shows that for literally tens of thousands of years on end, there are layers like 3 feet, 4 feet deep, a meter deep of shells and fish skeletons or fish otoliths, which is the hardest part of the skeleton. Fish skeletons are known to fall apart and rot and deteriorate. A lot of them are cartilaginous, and they just don't last more than, say, 20 or 30,000 years. You can't date them well. But the enamel that is on the otolith of a fish's inner ear, which is like a rock hard stone that has layers to it, very similar to the way our teeth form, they are able to take that, and they can both see how old the fish was and how big the fish was. They can even look at isotopes within that little bone in the fish's ear, and they can tell if the fish was eating protein, if the fish was eating certain isotopes and certain different molecules, and they can tell you a lot about whether that fish has a chemical makeup that would show, oh, it's eating algae mostly, or oh, it's eating protein, it's eating this or that. So they use that along with things from all across the world, including ice cores. That's more recently, like last 100,000 years, 50,000 years. And they look at cliffs and what we call the depositional record. And in case you guys don't know, I'm an archaeologist by training. That's archaeology with history undergrad, and then archaeology. That's what I went to school for. So that's why I love this stuff. And it's incredible because we date things all the way from lakes and looking at the pollen that lands on the lake every year and what it's made out of. Like maybe it's birch and aspen and alders for every year in a layer, and they're just thin little layers, molecular traces, thin little layers of, say, that pollen from those trees. And then there's mud, which is, everything from cattails to dead fish to clams to shells, all the stuff that lives in the lake, and that falls to the bottom and then kind of covers up that pollen layer. The next summer, pollen happens again, or spring. And again, it leaves a layer. Well, over time, we can see that in, say, this much mud, over the last 4,000 years, or however long that is, we can see that, oh, it went from birch to Douglas fir or cedar. So something changed in the climate. And with all these things, we can understand using pieces of this puzzle that's a worldwide interdisciplinary puzzle. And we can understand, because somebody in the fish hobby was like, let these kids outside are just yelling. Sorry if you guys hear them. But they are able to take things that you would never expect being able to get a date off of them. And they can look at the amount of, isotopes or the amount of radiation that is being put off or that is breaking down in something once it's exposed to light, in something once it dies with the carbon dating. And there's problems with each thing. There's things that throw off each date. And so you should always be skeptical of things with 1 or 2 dates, even 3 dates. But when they have 5 or 6 different ways to date a site, that's when you're like, okay, this is really something. This is really what makes sense. Also, archaeologists have a thing called the rule of deposition. And basically, what that is that everything has to make sense to putting layers. So if a tree falls, it's going to fall. And over time, yes, the forest will live and die, trees will shed their leaves, and layers of soil will slowly build up. Maybe the log will decay, maybe it'll get buried, maybe a mudslide will come. But you'll get these layers, and everything has to logically make sense into why the order is where it is. Sometimes rock over millions of years is going to shift, and it may be something that was a cliff or a mountain, maybe shifted 90 or 180 degrees, and you get these crazy formations. But you need to understand that we look at this with geologists, we look at this with biologists, paleontologists, and by looking at all the pieces of these puzzles, we can understand these things. And the case of these lakes coming for 10,000 years, then not being around for 8,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 years, and dust blowing in, sand blowing in, and then the lake forming again, and then dust blowing in, we can then look at cliffs of sandstone and say, look, that's where there was a lake. It's all carbon rich layering. And when we look at it under, under analyzation, we can actually say, this is where the lakes were. This is where all that rich biodiversity of fish was. Yeah, and yes, there are lots of kids running around outside right here out this window, riding their bikes, and I don't know why, but they like throwing rocks at each other. We threw pine cones at each other, and these kids are hardcore, I guess. They throw like straight up rocks. They're only 8 or 9, but someone's gonna get hurt, and not my kids. Anyways, so people living in Israel 900,000 years ago. That is, we know there were people there. There are human bodies. There are human bodies that are placed where all the bodies have their heads in one direction for thousands of years, where they're in different levels of the earth, where landslides or earthquakes and things have uncovered these sites. When we find a big old site full of information, full of material, we call that a midden or a shell midden or a bone or refuse midden. And it's Midden, midden, not mitten. But we take this, in fact, these kids are annoying me so much the way they are yelling. We're going to close the window and yeah, move. So they're taking these shell middens and they are looking at what's in them, and they're thinking, okay, what would we expect to see in their diet normally? And it might be antelope bones for the last 20, 30,000 years if they're living on the savannah. It might be zebras and gazelles and nuts and berries and whatever else, like tubers and roots. And we can tell a lot of times by the enamel on their teeth what was in their food. Yeah, damn kids, get off my lawn. I can't even find out where they are. Like I know where they are. They're somewhere over yonder. And my buddy's friend, he brought his kids over to play with the other kids. Hopefully we just soundproofed it so I can keep my mind sane. But man, those kids, I am the old man being like, get off my lawn, you damn kids. Yeah, at least fish don't scream, right? And right now, all these plants are literally making my house glow green. Like, I've got plants in the windowsill, and then I've got the tanks over there. I like that it's glowing green this time of day. Anyways, so 900,000 years, that's a long time ago. Well, these pits of trash and of bodies, those are in separate places as well, which is another key detail that lets us know, okay, well, people weren't just like dying and then getting eaten by their fellow humans, nor were they being just thrown in a heap without any care. which we see with, say, chimpanzees or with, other primates. We see that they just let the dead ones die. Sometimes they bury them. Sometimes they get together and they drag or carry around the dead ones, and there is some sort of grieving or grief. But with very few animals, would do they do anything with burying or moving all their dead to one place? And humans, there's a massive change in the environment when we start finding, hundreds of human bodies that were placed there for hundreds or thousands of years in one spot, all the same way. And maybe it might be that they're all missing their hands or something odd. They all have a crack on their in the skull and a certain incense or paint used. Well, all of these things are ways that we define culture or that we guess that there was culture there. And one of the fascinating things is fish, carp in particular, and cyprinids, a lot of them have little bones in their throat because they don't have teeth in the front. So, just like my fish over here, just like these guys don't have actual bones as teeth, and they don't have hard like enamel in their teeth. In their throats, they have itty bitty tiny bones that help them grind up the food that they eat, that helps them mash it up. So fish are like, the alien in the alien movies, in that most of them have front teeth or front lips that pull the food in and hold it in for a minute, and then their throat either grinds or smashes and mashes the food. And in their throats, we call that their pharyngeal teeth. And their pharyngeal teeth is what we are able to look at, especially in fish that are not so tiny, but fish that are, say, half a meter long or 2 feet long that humans were eating. Their pharyngeal teeth can be the size of, say, fingernails. And so we can use those teeth and we can find out what those fish were eating, how old those fish are, what species they are, all sorts of incredible info. It turns out, due to new research, that you would think, like, why would anybody fund this research? Who would give them $50,000 to look into this or whatever? But some university got a grant to take those fish teeth and put them in the oven. Why? Well, because it shows that humans were cooking their fish. It turns out that when you look at enamel, or basically the hard layer on the outside of the pharyngeal or throat teeth of fish, that those have a thin layer of crystallized, I don't know if it's calcium or calcium carbonate. It's a certain mineral, and it forms at very, very specific temperatures. So it may form at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, it has a different amount of carbon in it from the fire, and therefore it looks different. And at 500 degrees, it looks different than that. And at 600, different than that. And at 822, it looks different than that. So they can actually say this was this specific temperature because the crystallized structures on the outside of those fish teeth look a certain way. When exposed to fire, those teeth become charcoal covered and carbonized, which leaves a thin layer of essentially graphite. And so it leaves this thin layer similar to like what a pencil would leave in modern day schoolhouses. And that layer also has information. They can deduce whether they were burning hardwoods or camel dung. Camels were not domesticated a million years ago, believe it or not. So anyways, Brian, you're welcome. I'm glad you think this is interesting. So this is how we understand how hot they were cooking. More than that, what is amazing is it tells us that humans had fire 900,000 years ago in Israel. So did Neanderthals. So did Homo habilis. So did, Homo sapien, us. So did probably the Denisovans if they had been formed yet. And it tells us that there were a lot of fish being consumed. Now, what goes on from 900,000 years ago to around 300,000 years ago, which is a blink of an eye in biological and geological time? What goes on in around 500,000 years is our brain goes from 500 to 800 cubic centimeters in 8 million years. Well, all of a sudden, in 500,000 years, it goes from 800 to 1600 cubic centimeters. So our brain gets triple the size of any other monkeys or anything other than maybe the gorilla and orangutan and bonobo, maybe, for our body. Why does that happen? And for years, people have been saying, oh, it's because humans came down out of the trees, and this is when we started walking upright. Doesn't fit. Our hips have been ready to walk upright for 2 or 3 million years. We have had the ability to throw and to move in certain ways for a long time before that. So there's been all these suggestions. Well, I'm going to throw out a suggestion as a fish lover. Yeah, the hips don't lie. That's right, Mike. As a fish lover, this is when I mentioned humans came down to the Rift Valley. They made it all the way to South Africa. They started populating cave systems in South Africa. Real cavemen, believe it or not, as well as other hominid species that later would just die out, whether it was disease, whether it was failure. And you have to remember, humans also died out in most groups as well. Only a few made it. In fact, if you're watching this, your mother successfully was taken care of by her father or mother for her whole life. And that grandmother was also, and that grandmother, and that grandmother, and that grandmother, until we were all in the same group of humans. We know there was a bottleneck at some point, and so other than some specific West Africans, all of us humans at some point came out of Africa, and then we split up. And this is long, long ago. This is maybe even before these bones from the throat section of the fish that were being cut and removed from the fish and being thrown in the trash. They are showing signs that they were being cooked. They are showing signs that every night they were throwing another group of these bones in. They're finding literally like 40, 50, 60,000 bones from the otolith, from the little bone in the inner ear of the fish. They're finding throat teeth in the millions at these sites. So people are living there for tens of thousands of years, eating fish every day. And they're doing the same thing suddenly around 800, 700,000 years ago in South Africa, along the coast of Mozambique, and along the entire Rift Valley. So it is very, very likely that humans came down out of the trees, whatever you want to say, that we were spear hunting big game, we were running down big game. Most people don't realize this, but as humans, the number one way that we hunt, that we survive in cultures around the world from around the year 1900, when there were still a lot of tribal groups living primitive lives, as we used to say. And now we don't say that because some groups had technology and chose to give it up and went back to living a simpler life or a more primitive life from a European standpoint, yet maybe that was more sustainable. So now anthropology tries to get rid of the wording that tries to put a hierarchy to things. Clearly, having flashlights and antibiotics and certain inventions that is a hierarchy that occurs over time, and it's directional, and it kind of happens with information in an exponential pattern. But beyond that, I mean, historically, people, you have to remember that the big breakthroughs in technology may have been every 50,000 years, and it's that they came up with a new way to travel with fire. Now we know that mushrooms, certain mushrooms could be used to hold onto an ember for up to 3 days. We know that people were using pitch and sap from trees. We know that they started to invent these ways to carry fire. The problem is all of those things rot, and so we have no idea what's left. But one amazing thing about fishing and about humans using fish and eating fish is we still have the pile of bodies that they gutted and said, I'm not going to eat the bony stuff. And even though the cartilaginous parts of the fish, those are long gone, 800 million or 800,000 years ago, almost a million years ago, the otolith and the pharyngeal teeth lasted. And they tell us they were cooked at 800 degrees and they never touched the fire, literally. So that can tell us things like they were buried underground and hot rocks were put on top of it or below it, and they steamed the fish in a wrapper or something like that. Well, all across the human range, whether it was the South Africans, whether it was the people venturing into the Middle East and Asia, they started eating massive amounts of crabs, of clams, of mussels, of oysters. But whether it was freshwater bivalves and crustaceans or whether it was saltwater, we see that their diet changed so much that the isotopes in human enamel, all of a sudden we start seeing the same isotopes that we find in iodine. And we're like, oh my gosh, it's because they're eating so much stuff from the ocean that they're actually making their bones out of the stuff that ocean creatures make their bones out of, atomically speaking. And so we can tell when humans shifted from eating mostly stuff that came from on land to mostly stuff in the ocean. We can tell when they were mostly eating fish and whale and seal and whatever it was. If it originates in that food chain, we know that it was starting with things like krill. We can even tell now with new technology whether the food chain started with Daphnia and brine shrimp and freshwater creatures like that, and the fish ate that, and then other fish ate those fish, or whether it was saltwater. And it has a different footprint, a different marker chemically and also in us biologically with the way our genes developed. So it's super cool to see that all of the hominids that lived along the coast develop similar gene expressions in the DNA that we've found that's still good. And a lot of it's really broken up, especially when you go way far back. But the last 50,000 years, DNA is pretty good. I can still hear... Are these kids, like, outside my door? Anyways, so my point is, we have been somehow eating and dealing with fish for a million years. Very specific. Hold on. What are they doing? I gotta know what they're doing out here. I gotta show you guys what they're doing out here. What are they doing? Let's spy on them, these kids. Oh, that's what they're doing. So that's what they're doing. It's playing in the water. It's nice today. It was like raining cats and dogs the other day. Anyways, pardon if you hear all the... Yeah, I should have gone, dang kids. Anyways, I'm doing good. I am actually the cut on my leg doing pretty good. It looks pretty good. Here, I'll pull it up high enough. Looks pretty good. Just looks like a pink line. And so back to the story. You can't be mad. They're having fun. Yeah, you can't be mad. But I can't close my windows. So they're eating these things that show up in our DNA, in our genes. It shows up that we then developed the ability to eat certain things that humans couldn't even eat before. Can monkeys eat oysters? I don't know, but humans can. Can monkeys eat whales? Doubt it, but humans can. Actually, interesting fact, if you don't eat whale, by the time you are about 12 years old going through puberty, you will not develop the gut biome, the enzymes, or the mm, aptitude to break down all of the things that are in whale meat that you need to survive. And so when they say like expose your kids to lots of things, there's a biological component to not just that they will think it's gross if you don't, and they might accept it more later. But if you expose kids before they hit puberty, before all their enzymes and things are fully set, before their immune system is fully set, if you expose them to foods that are real hard to break down, for instance, like blubber, they'll be able to break down the nutrients from blubber. And average people can acquire more ability to, but you're never going to get the ability like somebody who was born and raised and ate that consistently. Same with organ meats and things like that. Humans had to earn, had to fight hard to win the ability to eat the organs of these creatures. And that is, when you talk about a meat eating diet, that is so important because it's where all the vitamins, the nutrients, the things that you need to live, especially when you can't go to the store and buy salt, or you can't get your iodine, or you can't get your vitamin C from things that are imported and so forth. That used to be in a lot of meats. And I have tried muktuk. I think it's terrible. I have had whale prepared several ways when staying with Alaskan natives. Seal was the worst thing I've ever eaten, I think. I couldn't chew it even. I chewed it like 3 times and I was just like, I can't do this. I'm so sorry. And had to put it in my napkin. Whale, I got down once when it was like a fermented version of whale that had been in a jar for 2 years underground and probably frozen. But yeah, just Joe, I cannot eat that stuff. It's so bad. Same with like shark and like some of the fermented fish they do. I mean, it's impressive that there are Arctic and they wouldn't call them subarctic. Yeah, subarctic cultures like Inuit, Yupik, and Greenlander people and like the Sami people that are able to eat reindeer and caribou and polar bear, any bear. Yeah, you can cook a lot of parts of bear that's like tolerable, but like bear fat, oh man, that's pretty gamey. Same though with any whale, any even just a lot of the Arctic fish that have just big fat supplies for cold water, just gnarly stuff. Anyways, humans were resilient and will find a way to survive even floating on pieces of ice. As the ice shrinks and contracts, and they have to go back down and find food that's not whales and things, they'll eat that. When they have to go back up to the Arctic and eat that, they'll go to that. So anyway, humans are pretty amazing. But we're going to jump now and we're going to talk about the picture just a little bit because I'm curious what your guys. Bear can have parasites. A lot of animals can have a lot of parasites. There are parasites you can get from undercooked meat of any sort. There are some parasites you can get no matter what in rare conditions. Also things like rabies where you don't want to be eating, or HIV, or from like a monkey. So there are some things that humans have traditionally eaten in parts of the world that you don't want to be eating undercooked, especially, but even cooked well, there are some diseases and parasites and viruses that we can get. I mean, look at mad cow disease, for instance. It happens far more, though, in farm processing, in when we are processing our food in massive scale, and when we are mixing body parts and manure and intestines and food. Hold on, I locked my wife out accidentally. And that's all stuff that, industrial farming has caused. Sorry, I didn't mean to lock you out. The kids were just screaming next door, so I quieted it. Okay, so for my next act, you guys. So the next thing that happens, and accidentally, yeah, no, I wouldn't lock my wife out. She's my one and only treasure in this world, other than my fish. Oh, and I have some cool news that I'm gonna tell you guys right now because it's a segue. I don't have another time to tell you, but both the Discord almost done. It is gonna be pay. So if you like the way things are and I'm answering your questions, great. If you want to not be a member on this channel, the Discord will now, when I launch it, and you'll hear all about it, I'll put up videos and stuff, we'll do live streams. It'll be the same where you can pay and you can post. And that way I can share media with you guys, but I'm going to commit every day an hour or two at least to being on there and commenting and chatting or sharing what I'm reading. We're going to host all the files that I come across that when I say, hey, today we're doing a video about, this new bass species in Alabama. Well, if I have a link to that file, I can now post it there. And so you guys can read all that. You can share it. If you guys think I did something really dumb and you want to make fun of me, we'll have a thread for that. So it should be cool. If you don't like that, don't worry about it. Nothing else is changing in the rest of the channel. So you'll still be good to go, even if you don't want to be a part of that. But so many people have asked for Discord that I'm going to shift, instead of reading comments 4 hours a day and writing emails, direct messages, and comments back to you guys 4 hours every day, that I don't get directly paid for, guys. But you guys, by watching, pay for my ads, pay with your time, pay with clicking, and I appreciate that so much. Members, you go above and beyond. Super chatters, you too. But that being said, with the Discord, it's like a direct one-to-one, just like when I answer paying members questions on here. That way, hopefully, I'm making sure I address those of you who are generous, or those of you even who can't afford to be a member. I get it. I mean, it's only $1.99, but I get it. You can't be a member of every channel. Maybe this is your 5th most popular hobby. I'm still going to try to get to your questions for 3 hours a week, or a day, or each day of the week. That kind of thing. And then hopefully, some days of the week I'll make 8 hours of content and maybe 4 hours of research or 8 hours of research. But we're going to try to do the Discord, and you guys will be a big part of deciding where that goes, how that's going to look. We'll have moderators and things for those of you who are long-term in the hobby. And I think it should be fun. So what's going on, Kenny? Good to see you, man. When is my OnlyFans account coming out? Yeah, we could do that. I think we'll show all my fish naked all the time. And that'll be $100 a month if you want to see my fish naked all the time. No, so anyways, I just thought I'd give you guys that update. And then also Crystal Castleman. Do I have her book right here? I don't. But she has a book that is the Bible of plants in the hobby. And that book is incredible. And okay, Cave of Wonders, take care. Have a wonderful night. The book, let me see here. It's called Aquarium Plants, and it's the 2019 version that has, it's a hardcover. She's putting out a new version that is a soft cover that is designed to be like a pocket guide, like a Peterson's field guide. So her old book is incredible, and I still recommend you check it out and get it. Aquarium Plants. Pretty straightforward. You can get it from her website or a few other places, but on the way is her new book, and her new book is going to have like every kind of booth plant that has a species in the aquarium trade. It has pictures of like every crypt and its flowers. It has incredible pictures and write-ups of like every species in the hobby, and then some. This book has 900 and some species. Crystal Castleman, it's probably backwards on your screen, but Crystal Castleman Aquarium Plants. She's from Germany. This is the English version. Now there's going to be a smaller version, like yay big. And I'll share what I think of it, honestly, with you guys as soon as I get it. The other thing, I want to put the waterfall into this tank and set it up so that we get the 65 going. I kind of want to stick with my idea of doing gobies and doing loaches, gobies, and maybe a few like nanofish that school, but the idea of having a splash zone with a waterfall. But my mind is still not made up, but I'm going to start building the rock background out of like a molding material, and I'll document that on the channel as I do that also, because I've never worked with the like epoxy and acrylic type molding materials that exist out there that you can use, including the gray stuff and the black stuff that are used for pond lining and pond decoration. But yeah, that book is great. I highly recommend the other one. There's a German version. I think there's a German, an Italian, and a French, and a Spanish, maybe, along with the English of that book. And I don't know if those runs are out or if they were limited edition, but there's definitely still a German and still an English book available if you want the Aquarium Plants 2019 Crystal Castleman book. Those are around. Okay, so let's finish up and let's ask you guys what so should I make a video about the Aborigines? This is a very controversial topic in that we don't know for sure how long that their sites have been around, but we do know that they are easily some of the oldest human sites anywhere in the world. Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia, of all places, they're definitely hominid sites that may be 300,000 years old. Back when you could walk most of the way to Australia. There is a spot called the Torres Strait that is, give or take, probably 60 kilometers across at the lowest it's ever been because of glaciation and sea levels and things. And humans probably on a good day from the top of a mountain could see across or could see birds maybe coming from the other side, but they still would have had to build boats. And we're talking 800,000 years ago, 700,000 years ago. So did they come across? Did humans, did Heidelbergensis, who came across when? Well, we know that by 70, sometime between 50 and 70,000 years, with 50,000 years being the most conservative, humans were in Australia. And we know that that was one of the quickest migration routes of our ancestors. Well, they're not our ancestors unless you're Aboriginal and you're watching, or maybe Polynesian or Micronesian. So these guys came across following the shorelines, probably eating oysters, eating clams, eating fish. That was probably the first time in the Rift Lakes and down in South Africa and up in Israel. That was probably the first time in human history that more than, say, 300 humans could live together and support it with meat. There were a few places where they could have ran big animals off of cliffs by scaring them and throwing rocks or starting like forest fires. Um, that's a lot of work, that's a lot of energy, and then you have to process the meat, you have to pound it, dry it, cut it open, do all that with stone tools. It's a lot of work. It's a lot easier just to pick up shellfish or to put a crawfish on a stick and hang it over the fire and eat, a wallaby when you're hungry, or eat a koala when you're hungry, whatever it may be. Um, oh, have a good time bowling, Kenny. Take care, man. And so, what I want to know is, do you want to know about the Brewer River and the Brewarina fish weirs? We know about other fish weirs that are 10,000, 20,000 years old. That's actually common archaeological knowledge in the last 20 years. Literally humans keeping fish in pens, in rivers, made out of rock. And this is their entire society. Their entire lives revolved around keeping up these places. Just like in Hawaii, where there are fish pens that are about 900 years old, we know that they passed down through their royal family who got to own the biggest ones, who got to build and have access to which fish pens. Some of them were up to 100 acres in size, and they would fill with the tide. Little fish would come in. Sometimes they'd open sections, and big fish, including sharks or whatever they're throwing bait out there for, would get in, and then they'd block it all off or net it off, and then they could section off other parts or have holes in the rock wall of different sizes for different size fish. And it may have been that, if you're in the royal family, you have access to any size fish you want, whenever you want. But if you're a very poor and, no status in the tribe, maybe you only get the smallest size fish pen and you get access to it once a week, all year round. Maybe the next level up in society gets access to the second size, which means you get fish, yay big. We don't know all the details about a lot of these places, but we know that in Australia, in Polynesia, and also in Portugal, in modern day Chad and Morocco and Algeria, we know that there are these fish weirs, and that they were set up so that fish either moving down rivers or in big lakes. Even Lake Tanganyika has a site that's 14,000 years old. It also has some sites that are probably 500,000, 600,000 years old, but we can't say that that's human. There were too many other two-legged things running around that are our cousins that screw up the timeline. But we can say in some far-flung places, like definitely Portugal, we know it was either Neanderthal or Neanderthal, however you want to say it, or Homo sapien. And so, who built it? 14,000 years, that's going to be human. If it's 30,000 years old, could be either one. And so, if one group did that and another didn't, it teaches us more about how we formed as a literal species, as the basis, the proto-culture of what it meant to be European. So anyways, I was just curious, is that close enough to fish keeping? I mean, it's fishing, it's subsistence fishing, but it's also, the Egyptians, for instance, the mormyrids, or the elephant nose fish and the baby whale fish, the knife fish, were literally seen as deities, as gods or representatives of gods, and therefore by killing one of them, you were killing something holy. You were killing a god or a part of a god. And by eating it, you were saying you're above it. And by consuming it, you're saying you should rule over that thing. And so to eat it was literally, you're not getting into heaven. You're getting damned to whatever bad juju happened in the Egyptian religion. And so they don't find a single bone in the shell middens of Egypt for 2,800 years. And it led some ichthyologists in the 20th century to say, were there even, I mean, we don't see pufferfish, we don't see mormyrids anywhere in the shell middens, in the waste piles of the people who built the pyramids, of the people who live in Luxor down, the upriver, the people who live in Alexandria. We don't see it there either. For 3,000 years, we didn't see it, and then all of a sudden, around the time of Jesus, suddenly the fish start showing up in waste piles. So some ichthyologists thought, well, the fish just didn't live here because it wasn't warm enough, or whatever changed in the biology of the river. But they see in natural formation, they find the otoliths and the pharyngeal teeth of those species. They found an imprint of a pufferfish, and it turns out that the Nile pufferfish, of course, has lived in the Nile the whole time. And before that, they find lots of it. Before Egyptian culture existed, they found tons of puffer and mormyrid skeletons. People ate them. It's just that the skeletons deteriorate in about 1,000 years. In bad conditions, like just buried under the sand. In ideal conditions, silt that is very fine, like ash from a fire, that gets swept over it in a flash flood. Maybe 10,000 years the fish cartilage can last, or an imprint can last. But even that, it gets wiped away pretty quickly. So we don't have a lot of evidence of that. And so it's literally rewriting history by knowing things like this. And then we see in their art, which I can show you guys too, they literally carved one of the oldest statues we know of is a mormyrid. One of the first deities that we can say that was a god to them in statue form, an idol. It's 8,000 years old and from the Nile River Valley. So it's pretty amazing that fish, they may be the reason why we grew our massive brains, shellfish, fish, clams, bivalves. And it may be that the reason we got onto two legs was to wade in the water, was to spearfish, was to throw nets. We don't know. It was probably a combination of that and a combination of running down animals. As I said, humans across the world, we are known to have hunted through exasperation hunting. It's called exasperation hunting because it usually involves teenagers, somewhere between 12 to 20-year-old, usually men, running down deer and antelope and, elk, whatever it may be, gazelle, zebra. And literally, we can outrun a horse or a zebra or a cow for sure, over the course of, say, 15 miles. All they do is they work in teams and they scare it, and they'll have it run up a hill, and then at the top of the hill there's another team of guys running, and they're just kind of jogging leisurely, but they scare it over and over and over until it literally is exhausted. And the animals will overheat, especially on a hot day. Humans, we sweat, we don't have hair or fur all over, at least if you're not Italian or Armenian or something. Sorry, guys. But then they literally just walk up to the animal and Steven Seagal it, So it's pretty crazy, but we find that in all of North America, in most of South America, all throughout the sub-Saharan cultures, like the Song or Kung San as they're known, and throughout Australia and Polynesia, we see that too. Some of the islands aren't big enough to run down big mammals. But that is what gave us an edge. was exasperation hunting. Um, Subtle brag about having a fridge. Yeah, yeah, right there. Oh, it's got a Baddis on it. Yeah, it's got a Scarlet Baddis. It's also got Prince on it. Oh yeah, Prince. Anyways, so yeah, I just want to know if you guys want to know more about this stuff, if you like that archaeology stuff. The videos usually don't do very well, but if I know that there's a core group of you, even like 100 of you that are stoked about it, then I'll keep making it. I mean, we can, one thing, it's one thing to do a live stream where people come in, they're like, eh. But if you guys want to know about Brewarina and the incredible, there's fish traps in Australia over 50,000 years old. Some people say up to 300,000. That's probably not an accurate date, but I'm just telling you the range that's in the books right now. But it's probably 40 to 60,000 years old, taking more reasonable ranges from across the academic world. And literally, there's spots where the whole sandy bank has washed it over, and so it's been buried for literally 20,000 years of history. And there's spots that literally, when Europeans showed up to Australia, there's this massive rock structure that there's black and white photos of. And it looks just like indigenous art from the Aboriginal people with the spirals and the swirls. And each section was designed for different fish. Some fish like flow, some like still water, some are a certain size, a certain time of the year, and they would open sections in these rock weirs or pens so that the fish could get in, and they'd throw bait and other things into those sections, knowing that, say, lingcod or whatever liked eating chopped up mullet, and they'd throw that into one section and leave holes open, and they'd swim in. Then they'd close up the holes, and the whole thing was like a maze or a funnel. And there's these fascinating shapes that now we're understanding actually are functional. They're actually like taking a bottle, just like when you're making a trap to catch fruit flies or something. It's easy for a fish to go in here and swim around and chill. They're eating. You can easily cap this off, and all of a sudden you got a fish in a pen. Well, they design them very much the same way all around the world. It's just that right now, Australia has the oldest known one that literally today people are still using. They still have stories about it. And some of the rock features we can prove are 30,000 years old, that are literally scooped out of the rock by hand. Somebody pounded on it with granite into softer stone, and they literally made carvings of animals. There's also incredible art that gets touched up every year by the Aborigines. And when human contact from Europe met Australia, suddenly a lot of the weirs get abandoned. And it's because smallpox kills a massive amount of the people in Australia. So much so that they weren't living in dense numbers in cities, where the Brewarina rock weirs used to support. When the first ship came through the bay and went up the river, they realized that at the rock weirs and traps where they're keeping fish, that they had at least 3 species, and of each species there were different sizes. So the fry could come and go back out to sea, whereas the big fish, they were trapped and they were saving them fresh. This is some of the oldest technology we know of, but basically they were able to do this, and they understood how many they could keep versus how many needed to go upriver and lay eggs, and if they're going to catch it going back to sea or if they're going to catch it coming in from sea. And they had technology to decide all of that. And so people worked on that. They built that, and we can see pictures both from just up above in the 1800s and now from planes and things in the 20th century, even with satellite. And now we can see where the river used to be a mile the other way, and there's still spots that are in the oral tradition, that are in the stories told by elders of, yes, the gods once had to walk 2 days or whatever it may be. And they remapped out the same sacred, designs on a new river after the Great Flood or after the drought or whatever it may be. So, yeah. But yes, M&S Brennan, I do need to also be careful. This is not, some of this is sacred, and it's not my history to necessarily tell or own as a fellow human. These people have broken off from the rest of the human population and been isolated doing their own thing down in Australia for 50,000, 100,000. We don't know how long, how many years. But we can at least say that it's a certain amount of time and that we know that that's going on. And then when we see a similar pattern with the same crazy spirals and the same wood slat boards and nets and rock weights that weighed down nets to throw and cast, when we see that in Portugal and we see that in the Yucatan Peninsula and we see that in Peru and we see that in all of Polynesia going out to the middle of the Pacific in Hawaii, it's pretty easy to say this technology worked and humans were using it a long time. So, guys, I am going to wrap it up. I know it wasn't the most interactive show, but I hope you enjoyed this kind of history, anthropology, archaeology chat. And if you live in Australia and know about the rock weirs, if you're Aboriginal, even better. If you have ancestry and would be able to chat with me, I'd love to know if I'm, culturally encroaching on telling anything or saying anything that would be taboo. I don't want to do that. And I really do respect this to the most because it's those taboos, it's those secrets versus who's allowed to know and who's not that literally kept these places sacred and that kept them protected and that kept the technology and the information of like when to catch the fish, that kept them safe. When outsiders learned of it or when other tribes learned of it, there's stories of, they learned of it and all of a sudden they harvested all the baby fish and the fish never returned. There's stories of what happens if you screw up the environment in every indigenous culture. There's floods, there's droughts, there's famines in every indigenous culture. So you guys remember, whether it's European or Asian or African or North American or South American or in the middle of the Pacific, you have an indigenous culture. You're living with people and on land that has a culture, that has a history, that has fish as part of its history, undoubtedly. And you're part of that legacy. So remember to keep those spots sacred. Learn as much as you can about them and maybe help you understand why it is that you're so in love with your fish, why we are so drawn and transfixed. Maybe we needed it for our brains to literally grow to become the species we are today. It was control and mastery of those fish that allowed us to be who we are today. Perhaps. All right, you guys, I love you so much, and I'm going to go take a nap. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next time.